Welcome to the Cafe Culture podcast, a season of discussions on culture, politics, philosophy and science.
At a talk recorded on the 7th of October 2013, Ronald Green discussed why nothing matters.
Okay, so I have a problem. I'm only allowed to speak for 20 minutes. It's not a problem for you, but it is for me, because I spent 5 years on nothing. When people said, "What are you doing?" I kept on saying, "I'm doing nothing." And anyway, so I've got to speak for 20 minutes. It's very difficult. That's not part of it. Okay, so, nothing. First of all, I'm very chuffed when people come out in the evening, so many people for nothing, which is wonderful. So I want to share a little bit with you why I thought nothing is important. But before I start, I would just like to mention that when I say why nothing matters, I don't want to depress you and say that nothing matters, meaning nothing matters. I.e., there isn't anything that matters. It's not a nihilism. It's not any of that. You won't come away depressed. Well, you might, but not for that reason. It is why the actual concept of nothing is important and does matter. And I looked into this because I wanted to find a different way of looking at the world, at things. We always look at what there is, and I wanted to look at what there isn't, because everywhere there is something, there is not something. So they say that, for example, we come from nothing and we go to nothing, which is, okay. But I mean, there is some sense in it, in that we are in the middle of there's nothing before and there's nothing after, as it were. And it's quite sensible in the sense that that wherever we are, what separates us from everything else is space, is nothing. We would not exist if there wouldn't be nothing around us. It is where there's something, there is nothing. And when there's nothing, there is something. Newton, for example, said that when he looked out in the sky, he thought that there's space, and the space will be there if you didn't put the stars in. Whereas the latest thought, Einstein said, no. Space is there because there are things there, and that there is only space because there are objects, and there are only objects because there is space. That's a very, very important point. So when I started looking at nothing, I found that wherever I looked, whatever discipline I looked at had a struggle with nothing. Whatever it is, it could be history and it's art, and it's science, and it's literature, and religion, of course. And when I started to look at it, I realized that there is a love-hate between us and nothing. This strange concept, which is the negation of everything, or of some things. So let me give you a very, very small or huge example that Western civilization was held back some 600 years because of nothing. This is incredible. When the Moors brought over the new numerical system that replaced the Roman one, the center of this system, the brilliant part of it, was zero. And it was an incredible system, because before that you couldn't do very much. But the church said no. The church stopped this whole system only because there was a zero in there. And they stopped it for the wrong reasons. As far as they're concerned, zero is nothing. And as far as they're concerned, nothing is a no-no. And for two reasons, as far as I can see. One is that God created the world from nothing, they said. Therefore, there is a world. Therefore, there can't be nothing. The world is here. And the second one is, there cannot be nothing if there's God. So nothing was out. And this was amazing. 600 years they just held back civilization. And in fact, in the two parts of Spain, in the medieval ages, in the Middle Ages, there was the part that was under Muslim rule that was thriving, and it was incredible with science and maths and astronomy, etc., etc. where the Christian part was just lying, doing nothing, because the church would not allow nothing. That's how powerful the feeling was against the idea of nothing. But in fact, they were very, very wrong. And in my book, I explain it was a translation matter. It was as simple as that. Zero is not nothing. Zero is something. Zero is used in maths as a pacemaker, as a placeholder, etc., etc. It is a number, not 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 7, 8, 9, 0. Now here comes the part where people usually throw stones at me. So bear with me. I would now want to show you how dodgy zero is in actual fact. Zero. If I have an empty basket, I would say there's nothing in it, and you would say yes, correct. There's nothing in it, but because that's not exactly true. There's all sorts of there's dust. There's whatever it is. Now, if I have a basket with fruit in it, apples, all right, and I take out the apples, and we'd say there are 0 apples. Now, if I have 2 baskets, oranges in one, apples in another, and I take them out, we would have 0 apples and 0 oranges. Those are different zeros. Those are different absences. One is an absence of apples, and one is an absence of oranges. Now, this is the part you won't like, those who like maths. If I do it in figures, if I do 8 minus 8 is 0, right? And I do 5 minus 5 is 0, those zeros are different. One is an absence of 8s, and one is an absence of 5s. Mathematicians don't like, they argue with me like crazy on that, but I just want to show you that an absence is an absence that you can feel. For example, an absence is something. If you go into a room where you know somebody had lived, they're now dead, as it were, you can still feel the presence of that person. You feel the absence. Now, this absence is very interesting. Sartre, whom you mentioned, he said in his book, which is not as good as mine, thank you, he said that when he was late for a meeting with Pierre, he felt the absence of Pierre and not the absence of the Duke of Wellington. That it's an absence that you can actually it's better in French. You can feel an absence. And if we get to art, people were very, very keen on absence, especially modern art. You can feel that they were trying for something. For example, you have Ad Reinhardt in the 60s, who drew a black square. He wanted to get to the basis of life. He drew a black square. Painted a black square, sorry. Then he painted another black square. Then he painted another one. For 5 years, he was painting black squares. You will not be surprised he committed suicide. He was desperately looking to take everything away to get to what's left, which he considered to be of what life is about. He couldn't do it. There was Yves Klein in 1959 who had an exhibition in Paris called Le Vide, and it was an empty gallery, but completely empty. But there were lots. It's all listed in the book. Lots and lots of people who were desperately trying to get to the idea that less is more, which is a nice concept. If less is more, that means if you get to absolutely nothing, you will get to everything. But that doesn't work. And these people were trying desperately to get to nothing. And in fact, we can't get to nothing, which is the crux of my talk tonight. And the point is, there is an absence of something, like silence is an absence of sound. John Cage had his famous symphony called 4 minutes 33, where he had an orchestra coming on, and they were absolutely silent for that amount of time. People were desperate to get to nothing, which they couldn't. And we get to the point that the difference is between the absence of something, which is silent or whatever, and the absence of everything. And that is the most important point that I actually got to, because throughout, for 2,500 years, people have been looking at this weird thing called nothing, because it meant that does nothing exist? And how can nothing exist? If it exists, it must be something. And if it doesn't, what is it? And is it an it at all? And how can nothing be an it? For example, now, you can't even talk about it. In fact, we are talking about it. And if I'm standing here driving you crazy with nothing, then nothing must exist, which is problematic, because sometimes it does and sometimes it doesn't. And if we look in fact artists before minimalism, this is not a new thing. This trying to get rid of stuff. If we look at anything after Renaissance art, where Turner and Constable, etc., where they're taking more and more away, and it's more and more fuzzy. The whole idea is to get to nothing, to get to real meaning. Okay, so religion, of course. Now, why is this all important? If we look at religion, where nothing is very big, because in Western religion we have the universe created from nothing. That's absolutely essential. It is God's greatest miracle, because without that, there's no point. I mean, that is it. To create something from nothing is the greatest miracle there is. So it's essential for God's existence, for him to have created the world from nothing. If he created it from something, it's no big deal. Okay? And the Eastern religions, they're very, very big on nothing. It's getting down to the basics, etc., etc. When I started looking at that, I thought they're just looking at nothing in a different way. But then I realized, no, they're not, because it's a different nothing. The nothing that Western civilization looks at is absolute nothing, which is the absence of everything. So that the Western religions build themselves up from nothing, and Western civilization believes in building up. You're very tiny, and you get knowledge, and you get bigger in all ways. Whereas Eastern religions are different. They believe in reducing things and to take things away until you are one with truth, and there's nothing there. But it's a different nothing. Because however hard they try, they can never get to the absence of everything. They will get to the absence of a lot of things. But while they are there is still something. And this is the crux of what I'm saying tonight, is that there is a difference between the absence of something, which I call nothingness, and there is the absence of everything, which I call nothing. Now, of every religion and creed and belief, they all have something in common, and that is nothing, of course, but they all have something in common in that they say and tell you always that death is not the end. Yeah, have a look at them. They've all got something to say about it to make everybody else feel good, because they have the answer. It doesn't matter if there's heaven or hell or purgatory, or we don't really need to die if we do X and X, Y, Z. All of them have that in common. Okay, it's not so much denial. It is that it is impossible to imagine nothing. It is impossible to imagine being dead. It is possible to imagine dying, and it is possible to see that other people die. But to imagine nothing is impossible, because you have to imagine a world without yourself, which you can't do. You can imagine a world without yourself as if you're seeing a film, but you are actually watching that thing in your head. You cannot imagine not imagining. And that is nothing. And nothing is just out of what humans can possibly get to. It's what what fascinated me so much that I felt that I had reached the edge. I could not move any further, because moving any further would mean I would remove myself, and that would be, well, I wouldn't be here, and you wouldn't be here, because somebody who's written a better book than Sartre for a start. But anyway, and thank you for that. Nobody's ever told me that before. That's wonderful. So how am I doing with my 20 minutes? Oh, okay, I'm coming to an end of nothing now. I posited something called nothing gene, right? It's something that is in humans that does not allow us to imagine nothing. If we could imagine nothing, we wouldn't get out of bed in the morning. We just can't. We just can't. It doesn't matter how hard you try. It doesn't matter if you tell me when you're asleep nothing, because you wake up again. Even if you didn't dream. Nothing is just not. And it is so difficult. It was difficult to write about it, because I'm the one saying you can't imagine what I was telling you you can't imagine. Okay? So I was going a bit crazy then. But the point is, not being able to imagine what you can't imagine is a very unimaginable thing. Okay? So this nothing gene is the most essential thing that we have in us, because death is the most horrific thing. But if you believe that there's something after, etc., etc., it's not that bad. But if you just can't even get to that, and by the way, it's not only religious people who tell you that there's something after. You'll hear a lot of New Age stuff about the spirit carries on, and we are atoms, and therefore we really carry on, and all that stuff. But that's just another way of saying, well, we don't really die. But I mean, to face the fact that not only that we do, and there is nothing, whatever that is or isn't, is very, very dodgy. So I will briefly finish, because I think my 20 minutes are up. But by saying that the mixture of something, nothing, and nothingness is what life is about, because the something is whatever we see. Nothingness is what defines us, because it separates us from everything else, and nothing, the absence of everything, shows us our own limitations. So if you want to say tonight, and you're going to come out with what is the meaning of life, I can sum it up. I wrote this down on the train, actually. The meaning of life is that life is everything. Thank you.
Cafe Culture North East is supported by Newcastle University, Peels and the British Science Association. We're also supported by Ginger's Cafe in Dun City, who host the events.